Well, guys, welcome back to the Jacques Talk podcast. I told you when we started this thing, we were going to venture into pop culture, talk about some music, and that's what we're doing here today. And our first guest on that topic is a major guest. He is the authority on all things hard rock and heavy metal. He's nationally known. He's syndicated. It is the great Eddie Trunk. Eddie, it's a pleasure to be speaking to you.
Jacques, thank you so much. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
I want to start with this, Eddie. What's it like to grab your cell phone and text message Sammy Hagar? I just want to know what that's like.
You know, I'll be honest. It is. I've been doing this a very, very long time. I've been lucky to be doing this for almost 40 years now. I started right out of high school, and over the years, I've built some great relationships and friendships and trust with a lot of major name artists, which I appreciate and value and respect a lot. So Sammy is a guy that if you bring up as an example, it would certainly be pretty amazing because I grew up a huge fan of his long before he was even in Van Halen. And it's funny with him in particular because I had always, this sounds ridiculous, but even as a kid, seeing him, hearing him, going to concerts, I felt like he was a guy that was a very relatable guy that I could connect with, that was kind of like me, just a regular dude, even though he was on that stage playing to thousands of people. And then when I finally got to know him, which is probably 20 years ago now, and we actually became friendly, the guy I thought he was as a fan is actually the guy who he is. He really is a guy like that. So it's interesting you bring up him as an example because of all the artists that I've had close relationships with, he is exactly what I thought he would be even before I knew him. And the other day I posted on my social media, on my Twitter and Instagram, a photo that I came across from about 6-7 years ago of he and I on the steps to his airplane. And he gave me a ride in his plane to Boston for an event that I was hosting that he was playing. And I wrote on if people saw the social media post, I was like, I hashtagged it, things the teenage Eddie Trunk would never have imagined happening. So it is pretty cool. But I always on the exterior, Jacques, play it cool and don't get too fanboy-y. But inside, it's still a pretty darn cool thing.
Yeah. Well, I'm just a local sportscaster here, and certainly years back, Michael Jordan came to the arena to play the then New Orleans Hornets, and I had a chance to be in the scrum that day and ask one question, and all my friends made fun of me because they could see my face in the back. Oh my God, I love you, Michael Jordan, that type of thing. But yeah, I know exactly what you mean, and I'm just gonna say right off the bat, he might be my most favorite performer. My friends make fun of me. Oh, there's Jacques going to see Sammy Hagar again at some casino or whatever. But he's never let me down in terms of, I've never seen him dog it at a show, never seen him go through the motions, voice still at top level at 73 years old. And he's one of the reasons why I got into Van Halen in 1986, being 19 years old. 5150 to this day is probably like my most favorite album ever. Dreams and Why Can't This Be Love and Love Walks In. I mean, maybe some of the Van Halen, the purists that, Romeo Delight and all that, they don't like that stuff, but that's what I grew up on. That's what I like. So I've kept up with him ever since, really.
Yeah, I've always looked at the Van Halen eras and the Roth Hagar thing, which is always an interesting battle amongst the fans, it seems. But I've always looked at it as just two different bands. And I like both bands a lot. I mean, the first 4 Van Halen records are undeniable. But I was a Sammy Hagar fan long before he joined Van Halen. And I was ready for a change in Van Halen at the time he joined. I thought that David Lee Roth's antics had gotten way overblown. He was just doing all these things where he was just coming out at the edge of the stage and holding his hands out for 20 minutes and letting people applaud and all that over the top stuff. That was a big thing of his, obviously, but I was just kind of done with it at that point. So to me, it was a welcome change at the time. And 5150 is still an incredible record. And you're right about Sammy, taking out the personal end of it. I can tell you, because I do know him personally, he's a wonderful guy, but taking all that out, if you just look at it from a musician standpoint, he's one of those very few people that is, I call ageless wonders. People that in their mid 70s still doing things as well as they've ever done them, still creative, still making new music, still playing and singing really well, and still out there. Like, the guy is constantly still creating. So that's a pretty remarkable thing. He could easily just rest on his catalog, but he put out a new record a year or so ago, and He's always out there staying busy. So I give him a lot of credit. It's good. As I get older, people like that are inspirations to me to say that you can still live a good life and still stay busy and active regardless of your age.
Eddie Van Halen passed away, the great Eddie Van Halen. It's been a little more than 6 months now. You've had some great interviews with Sammy, Hagar, and Michael Anthony about Eddie. It's cool to go online and go to YouTube and see like a 15-year-old kid watching an Eddie Van Halen solo for the first time and reacting to it. There's been a lot of that in the last 6 months. I'm sure if we'd be normal Eddie, we would have had a stadium somewhere and some 50, 60,000 concert with people playing Van Halen songs. We haven't had that yet. Where are we at now 6 months after the legend is no longer with us?
Well, I don't know what the family has planned and if they're going to do something like that. I mean, the thing about Van Halen is they have been incredibly tight-lipped, incredibly close to the vest. They really have not done much at all, even when Eddie was still alive. Obviously, the last 25 years or so of his life, there was very little output. There has not really been anything as far as a lot of live records or bonus stuff. There's a box set that I know that exists that they never put out from years ago. So there's a lot in the archives. And shortly after Eddie passed away, I had his son Wolfgang on my Sirius XM show. And Wolf explained that there are just tons of stuff in the archives. But it's going to take time because some of the tapes have to be restored. Some of them are not properly labeled and they need to go through it and see if it's even stuff worthy of being put out. So I think, much like an artist like Prince, that there's a ton of stuff there. It's just going to take some time before they get around to deciding what they want to do. And of course, don't forget that Wolfgang is about to really officially launch his own career with the release of his record in June. So I think that's where his focus is. But his word to me was everything in time, we'll evaluate it and see. And look, a lot of people would love to see this, some sort of tribute. And obviously one would be deserved and warranted if they did it. We just don't know because you don't want to do anything without the family's blessings and being involved in signing off. It still may be too soon for them. You're still up against a lot of restrictions with COVID in certain areas. So, maybe it's something that for the 1-year anniversary or something is done. I don't know. I haven't heard anything definitive, but it's definitely something that should happen. In a related note, Neil Peart from Rush passed away, and that's been a couple of years ago. And his family tried to do and put tickets on sale for a benefit in Toronto or a tribute in Toronto. That still hasn't happened because of various things. So if you announce something, you want to make sure it's buttoned up and it's right and that everybody can do it the right way.
Yeah, and you're totally right about how secretive they were. I mean, I remember Eddie Van Halen popped up at a Tool concert. And it's like, well, he's not bedridden. He's out. He's enjoying a concert with his son. I mean, I guess he's okay. And then a month or two later, I get a phone call. Hey, your boy passed away today. So that was just all kind of strange. And they were private, like you said. You just didn't know what was going on.
I mean, it's been tough. And I was critical for the last 25 years or so because you just wanted some more output, and it was frustrating we didn't get it. But it's hard to say why, and it's hard to say what was really going on there. I mean, he was one of the guys that I was asked about and requested from my audience the most to have an interview with. And of course, I would have loved to have done that. He was my number one guy to try to get. I did interview him once, and I did meet him once. But, they were just very resistant to doing anything and talking about anything. And I had some dialogue with the camp over the years, and I'd helped them out on a couple things that they had asked about. And we had when I started doing that metal show, my old TV show, we did a bit in the very first episode pretending the guys were pretending they were out front of a Van Halen. They were out front of a Van Halen show, and they pretended they were talking to Van Halen. When I know Eddie Van Halen had seen that, and he sent us a note about it. So all great stuff. It's just there was really a great disconnection between them wanting to really very private, a lot of walls up. And you're right, the news of his death was extraordinarily shocking just because we didn't know what was really happening because there was never an official statement. And one minute you heard, and I had heard stories that he was close to death. And then the next time I would hear stories that we'd see that he was out at a concert. So it's very, very hard to figure out what exactly went on there, but they were just intensely private, which of course I respect, but the fans certainly wanted more. And maybe we'll get it, but obviously we'll get it when they have time to get into the archives.
And Eddie, to kind of piggyback on what you said, in my opinion, there was almost like there was two careers of Van Halen. There was from the debut album in '78 to the Balance album in 1995. They really could do nothing wrong. Even when they lost Roth, they get Sammy Hagar and they just keep rolling. And then one of your callers one day, I listened to your show, he made a good point. He said even a guy like Eddie Van Halen, as brilliant as he was still insecure about writing songs and this and that. And I just wonder, Gary Cherone, very talented guy, class act, and I would agree with you. I wouldn't really blame the Van Halen 3 album on him. It was 1998. Van Halen was kind of passé, and just the songs weren't all that good. But I think he made a great point. He said that experience might have shell-shocked Eddie Van Halen a little bit. And you look at it, after the Van Halen 3 album, there was the Roth album in 2012, but that was all like remakes of bootlegs from like the late 70s, right? He just did not write new material after that album.
Yeah, that's a great point, Jacques. I've never really thought of that, but you're right. I mean, when you think of the last record of all new material, it would have been the Van Halen 3 record. Now, I know Gary quite well, and I know his manager is a good friend, and there is music. There's about 5 songs that were done for the follow-up to that record. And I heard the recordings, and they were way better than what was on that record and way more in the Van Halen traditional sound and wheelhouse. Yeah. But obviously it was scrapped and never came out. So, it seemed like he started to create a response to Van Halen 3 that was going to be more in line with what the fans wanted, but then pulled back from it.
It just was a little disappointing, it was just like the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, Eddie. Okay, that's like your favorite team. You want to see your favorite team get recognized, and 2 of the guys show up. It's like, and then they finally get back together with Roth. This is the tour that all these people have been looking forward to since 1985. And they can't get Michael Anthony up there. It's always just like one thing that just wasn't quite in line. And so, but look, I'll say this now that Eddie's passed, I'm glad that his son got to play all those shows with him, so that's a good thing looking back on. I can't complain about that now. Let me ask you this. So you interviewed the great Steve Perry, the vocalist of Journey. He's kind of like Barry Sanders, Eddie. He just, at the top of his game, he just walked away. He's like, what? He's gone? And for 25 years, he disappeared. Nobody knew where he's at. Is he going to sing again? He stepped on stage with some band called the Eels at one point. So he finally comes out with a solo album. You were the first person that interviewed him in 2018. Is that right?
Yes, when he was coming back with his solo record, yeah.
I find it spectacular. I know for a fact that there are bands that had 5 hits 30 years ago that are still making $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 a night to go play 90 minutes at a casino. Steve Perry, who his voice has appeared on countless classic songs, after he came out with this album, he just didn't tour. He didn't do anything. I was just so disappointed. I would think that, yeah, he's 70 years old, 71, whatever. He can't hit it like he used to, but just hire some background singers, have them do the heavy lifting. I mean, I know people would pay money just to go say, hey, look, hey, son, that's Steve Perry. That's one of the greatest of all time. He just not interested.
Yeah, it's hard to figure. He is yet to sing live, even with the release of that record a few years ago. And I don't know what the issue is. If people heard that interview, I did ask him that question. I did say to him, could you sing live? Like, could you sing the Journey songs live? And he was very honest in his answer. He said, I could, but we'd have to tune down a little bit.
Sure.
And there's no shame in that. I mean, that's very, very common for artists as they get older, that the band has to tune down. And for people who aren't musicians, and I'm not a musician, but I do know this from having talked to them, that when you talk about tune down, it just means that you bring all the instruments down a half step, because it makes it easier for the vocalist to sing over it in tune. If it's in the original key, it might be a key they can't do anymore. And a ton of older artists do that, and there's no shame in it. to me, the only shame in it is when bands go out and play and the person's not really singing and they're lip syncing. That I have a big problem with. But if you got to tune down or you got to bring a backing vocalist out on stage, I have no problem with that. There's no shame in it. I don't know what it is with Steve. I don't know him that well. That was the only time I interviewed him and met him.
Yeah.
And it was a great conversation. We had a great talk. And I thought that it was going to be him diving all back in again and really getting out there and wanting to play. It just didn't happen. He just never, ever did a live performance. And we all know that right now, the way the music business is set up, if you're not touring and you're not playing live, you're really not in it, because that's where it's all happening.
Yeah.
So I thought it was great that he came back out. I thought it was great that he made a record. I thought it was great that he did some interviews and finally connected with the fans. But nobody could figure out what was going on and why that has still been the case, where he has not done a live show yet. And there's certainly opportunities. People would love to see him. I think the world knows it's not going to sound exactly like it did in 1979, but that's okay. That's okay. So I don't know. I don't know what his long range goals are. I don't know where the issue is. There could be some insecurity that's creeped in. There could be a situation where you just don't feel like it's something you want to or can do. It could maybe mess with your head a little bit, It's really hard to say. But even Neil Sean, who, when I was about to do that interview, I know Neil, and he messaged me and he's like, man, send Steve my best. I'm so glad he's doing stuff again, please. And this is Neil, was even curious. So nobody really knows except for Steve what's in his heart and what he does and doesn't want to do. And look, much like the Van Halen thing, what he's left us with, what he's given us is tremendous and will stand the test of time. But as fans, you always like the artists we are still lucky enough to have out there going, we'd like to see them do stuff.
And you have a saying that you always kind of break out: don't stay too long at the party, right? And he's the opposite of that. People want him to stay at the party, and he just won't stick around.
Well, look, Jacques, if Steve Perry came out and he sang and he was croaking up there and he was terrible and he has nothing left in his voice, then that's exactly the point. But judging from the record he made, that would not be the case. He'd be fine. We know he'd be able to sing, and it would be well enough. There's a lot of artists that make a fine living and go out and tour all the time that are only about 50% of what they once were.
Right.
But the fans are still happy seeing them and accept it for what it is. There's only a few of those freaks: Sammy Hagar's, Glenn Hughes, Robin Zander, Paul Rogers, very, very rarefied air. Steven Tyler, who in their 70s are seemingly unaffected and can do anything. Most people, it's the opposite, and most fans are cool with that as long as they're doing the best they can. And look, there's a point where somebody just hits a wall, and it's just like, okay, it is time to stop, and they shouldn't keep going. And that's when I say you got to know when to say when.
And since you brought that up, I'll move into that. You, and to a much lesser extent me, we pay attention to the people in the bands. We know who's in the bands. We know that Sebastian Bach hasn't been in Skid Row in forever. We know that. But, a couple years ago, Eddie, I go to a concert, and this is kind of humorous and morbid. Warrant is playing, and Warrant comes out, and I hear some woman behind me says, "Where's Janie?" And, Janie Lane, the lead singer of Warrant, who sang Cherry Pie and all those big hits, he unfortunately passed away like 8 years before that. These rock promoters, they're buying a logo and they don't want you to ask any questions, and it's not, I guess, false promotion. You buy the ticket, you give your money. This is what it is. With the band Rat, they've broken up like into 3 different groups. Even a band like Great White, they've got like 2 different groups going. Foreigner, you go see Foreigner, Mick Jones stops by every now and then. The rest of the band is not original people. I guess most people, they go hear the songs, they sing along, they have a few beers, they leave, they're happy. I don't know.
Yeah, it's definitely, we're in a time now where it's definitely brand over band. And that's why there are these wars over who owns the name of a band. Because if you own the name, you can do anything with it, including putting them out on tour with no original members. So that's why there is these huge wars over, legal wars over rights to name ownership. And you see it more and more. And look, a promoter and a casino or a venue, they don't care who's in the band or not. They don't care even if the band's actually playing live or not. All they care about is just putting that logo on an ad mat, sell tickets. Will people come and can we sell a ticket and put fannies in the seats? That's all they care about. I think as fans, we have a greater responsibility and to know who is or isn't in these bands. And then, as I often say, you vote with your wallet. You make your decision accordingly. If you're cool with the lineup and you're cool with who's in the band, great. Go enjoy it, buy the ticket. If you don't like that someone's not there, don't buy the ticket. That's the only way it's going to change. It's never made any sense to me when people knowingly go to a concert and they know that somebody that they want to see is no longer in the band. And then when they get there, they complain about it. It's like that. Why did you buy the ticket in the first place? It doesn't make any sense. So It's really quite simple. And here's the last thing I'll say on this, Jacques, and this makes me nuts. Yeah. But I will get calls to my radio show every day from fans who will say to me, hey, whatever happened to whatever band? Could be Warrant. It could be Striper.
That's the one that sets you off. The Striper one's the one that sets you off.
Yeah, could be Faster Pussycat. It could be anyone.
Right.
And there's just, most of the time people start that question with, I'm a really big fan of whoever, whatever happened to. And that makes me nuts because you can't identify as a really big fan of any band and have any excuse for not knowing what is going on with them. Even if it's nothing, even if the answer is nothing, you should know that because we are in this world where everybody with a phone can go to Google and find out everything. And so many of these bands at this level that we're talking about, the 80s level, a lot of them struggle to sell tickets and let people know they have new music out because it's not getting played. Yeah. So if you're a hardcore fan, you should be on their websites, on their social media, and you'll know exactly what they're doing. You should know that Janie Lane passed away many years ago. You should know that somebody called me yesterday, hey, I'm a big Saigon Kick fan. Whatever happened to them? Well, if you're a fan, you should know that the leader of that band just put out a new record recently. Now, I'm not saying you need to know that if you're just a casual fan, but if you identify as a big fan and they were one of your favorite groups and you've just been lost for 8 or 9 years, it's really simple. Get on the computer, type them into Google, and you'll get all the information you want. And they would love your support if you still care.
Yeah, we don't have to go to the grocery store and get the Metal Edge magazine anymore, right? We're not relying on that.
I love those days and I miss those days, but yeah, it's a click away. So there's no excuse to not be in tune with what's going on if you proclaim to be a fan of a band.
Eddie, I went to see Bon Jovi a couple of years ago, and I'm wondering, I'm thinking about business, music business, and is a band like a sports team? Meaning, okay, I go see Bon Jovi in New Orleans, I'm looking around, I think there's 13,000 people there. Richie Sambora, the famous guitarist, he's not playing in the band. Is it like a sports team thinking, you know what, if we're still winning, and we can cut that guy's salary, and we don't have to pay that guy, and we're still successful, can we move ahead? I know Richie's got his issues, but I think you might know what I'm getting at there.
Well, yeah. I mean, I think everything's case by case when it comes down to that. I mean, in a situation like Bon Jovi, I mean, yeah, I thought losing Richie would be a huge blow to that band. But the thing was always built around John, and whether you like or dislike what Bon Jovi is now, simple truth is John has steered that masterfully. He has reinvented that band. He's turned it into this mainstream, almost adult-leaning rock band. They're very different than what they were in the 80s, and it's built totally around him. It always was his thing, but it is now more so than ever. Again, I just think that as fans, you owe it to yourself to be educated. I tell people all the time, concert tickets are really expensive.
Yes.
And it's no different than if you're buying an appliance. What are you going to do? You go online, you check it out, you look at the reviews, you see what other people said about it. Do the same thing, because you know what? Your concert tickets are probably going to cost you more than a refrigerator. So do the homework, know what you're looking at, know what you're getting into, because the promoters, by and large, and sometimes the bands themselves, aren't going to give you that information because they don't want you to know all the details because they just want to get you in the room. And then even if it's not the guys you really want to see, they hope that by the end of the show, you walk out saying, hey, you know what? They were really good and I'm okay with it, which is fine, by the way. Again, it's personal choice, but just be educated with what you're going into.
Absolutely. All right, Eddie, the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame is coming up. Always a controversial subject. You posted the 5 people you voted for. I counted, are there 16 people on the ballot? Is that right?
Something like that, yeah, give or take. That's of the nominees, yeah.
Okay, so you voted for Devo, Foo Fighters, Iron Maiden, New York Dolls, Rage Against the Machine. Look, the horse has been out of the stall for decades on pop people getting in and what is rock and is this the Music Hall of Fame or Pop Music Hall of Fame or whatever. Tell me about your votes. Some people may think of Devo, they think of those guys with the funny hats who had one hit Whip It. I know that that's not your opinion on it. Foo Fighters, I'm thinking, you know, we're getting older. We think Foo Fighters is a new band. I think their first album was around 96 or something. Iron Maiden, you know, I'm not really familiar with their stuff outside of Run to the Hills or whatever, and I know how huge they are, but never really listened to them. New York Dolls and Rage Against the Machine. Your 5 votes. Tina Turner, 82 years old. She's on the ballot. Just had a big documentary. I'm wondering if that's strategic or not.
Well, Tina Turner is in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame with Ike and Tina. So if she was to go in, it would be the second time. So that's why that one's a little bit tough to frame. But my ballot is done with my audience on my radio show. I do it live on the air and I let them call in and push me one way or another. And by the end of the 2-hour show, we come up with that ballot every year that you just saw for this year go in. The ballot, in all honesty, on, you know, I lean more into the hard rock world. That's been fairly it's fairly light for the hard rock stuff this year in terms of nominees. And my audience is much more geared towards the hard rock stuff. So I wrestled with a lot of those picks. And at the end of it, I ended up, and people can hear this show when I went through the process of coming up with that, because it's on the app on SiriusXM now. But I just basically got to the point where I'm like, you know, one of the reasons why I was made a voter for the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame is to, you know, to let my voice be heard for the more rock leaning things that get nominated. So at the end of the day, I just decided I'm going to do what I feel is right here and what I feel is needed. And that is vote for the real rock bands on this thing. So to that end, it was Rage, Foo Fighters, who, for both of those bands, you can make the case it's a little too soon, given that Foos are only eligible now for the first time. Rage has been eligible for a couple of years. But again, not to say neither of them are worthy, but it's just really kind of soon when you consider a band like Van Halen didn't even go in that soon. But right. Again, it's not the band's fault. So those are truly rock bands. I wanted to do them. Iron Maiden is one of the all-time great metal bands. That was a no-brainer, even though I doubt Iron Maiden even gets involved in the Hall of Fame if they were to get inducted. So they were in. New York Dolls, a very influential band, not commercially successful, but super influential. So they made sense for me. So there's the 4. And interestingly, for people who heard that radio show, I had one slot left. And there was a lot of deliberation on that show between Devo, Todd Rundgren, and somebody else. There was a third rock act that there was a lot of people like arguing about throughout the show as which one it should be.
What about the Go-Go's? Belinda Carlisle, too sweet, too sing-along-y? What?
Oh, that was the third one, actually.
Okay.
The one we were all arguing for the last spot was Todd Rundgren, Go-Go's, or Devo. And you could easily make the case for all of them. Rundgren as a producer, songwriter, he's been on the ballot a bunch. He should be there. Yeah. Go-Go's pioneering female rock act, new wave rock, whatever. And interestingly and cool about the Go-Go's, they actually wrote their own material, some of it, most of it. So that's a big distinction for me. And then again, Devo is more about the electronic music that they pioneered. I was okay with any of the 3. It was just luck of the draw how that one went.
Kiss. I kind of look at it kind of like LSU and the Saints, the stuff I cover. It brought me a lot of fun as a kid going to the games. But if the Saints have a bad draft, I have to talk about, well, they drafted these three guys and they're not playing or whatever. I mean, you got to be objective about what you're talking about. And Paul Stanley, you're a rock god. You know, you've written all these hits and everything. Really, you're gonna push somebody away because they just don't like one aspect of the thing you're doing? You know, I'm just gonna pledge my support. You've got to cover the stuff objectively.
Yeah, well, look, I'm lucky that I've had a great career that still continues. Again, I'm 38 years into doing this. My passion for music, radio, TV. The whole reason I got into this, Jacques, right out of high school, was to share my love and passion for this music with other people, and to share the good, the bad, have the debate, have the dialogue, have the discussion. Debate is healthy. You know, I think that that's a really important thing, to have objectivity. We're in a world now, unfortunately, where there's such hypersensitivity. There's a word police out there. Everybody is too PC, in my opinion. Everybody's way too thin-skinned, in my opinion. Yeah. And I don't really cave to that. And I believe that it's important that on the radio, or back when I was doing that metal show or whatever I was doing, that the dialogue that I have with my audience, or on TV or on the radio, is the same dialogue I would have with any of my friends if we were at a bar and nobody was recording or watching. So, you know, look, there's some things, you know, personally about people that you're not going to, I never betray a trust, meaning that if somebody said to me, and this has happened on a ton of occasions, I've had somebody in a band that said to me, look, this is off the record. This is not for public. Yeah. I have never in my life breached that, and never would. But when you're just talking as fans about what you like, what you don't like, what somebody should or shouldn't be doing, you got to be able to have that discussion. And most bands and most people in the bands understand that. They remember what it is to be a fan. I don't consider myself a journalist. I don't consider myself anything but a fan who has a bunch of platforms and has built a huge following by being a fan and being passionate about what I do and being consistent with it. So, you know, you're going to run into those problems when you're like that. If you just tell and say what everybody wants to hear every single time, honestly, it's boring, it's predictable, and I don't do it. So when you're honest and want to have dialogue, most artists understand that, and there are a few that just don't. There's a few, like the person you mentioned, where you have to be on the marching line with what's being sold at that time. And if you look at the history of the career of Kiss, that each time, you know, the mandate, like any band, changes based on what they're doing at that year or that decade. So I believe in objectivity. I believe as a fan, you're always going to have things that you like and don't like. If you look at the arc of any band you've loved, most people would be lying to themselves if they didn't say there was a period of time that you weren't as into what they were doing, or just didn't like what they were doing and checked out. And that's fine. That's what your prerogative is as a fan. So you could name any band to me right now, and some of my all-time favorite bands like Kiss or UFO or Van Halen or Rush or Aerosmith, and I could tell you, and I would have no problem telling you, periods of their career where I was like, that ain't for me, I'm out. I didn't watch, I didn't listen, I didn't go. Sure. That's what being a fan is. And most of these artists understand that and get that. There's some that just can't, they just want you in line with what they're doing. And they're so used to everyone around them telling them exactly what they want to hear. And going on, 15 podcasts that are just these super fans that have not many listeners or viewers, but they're going to pump them with everything they want because they're just so grateful that they're there on that screen for them, and not really get any objectivity in their life. And it's unfortunate. The vast majority of artists I've dealt with in the decades have been totally cool and get that. And sure, they might bust my balls. They might be saying like, yeah, we heard what you said about that record or whatever. The vast majority, but they'll still roll with it. They'll do the interviews. They'll debate it. I'd love for them to debate it. Sure. I'd love for them to come with a counter and have a healthy debate. But there's a handful that are super sensitive and fragile and just, no matter how much, no matter if 95% of what you did for their whole career has been positive, that 5%, that's it. You're done. And I'll tell you one last thing that brings this full circle to close it out, because it's with the guy you started with. The guy who totally gets this is Sammy. Because I will never forget, Sammy Hagar called me. Sammy Hagar put out a record probably 8-10 years ago that I don't think a lot of people even know exists. It's called Cosmic Universal Fashion. Yeah. You know that record?
I do buy all his stuff. Tell him I buy all his stuff. I have it, yes.
It was not a well-received record. It was not really a classic record by any stretch. But I remember when he was making that record, he sent the record came to me and he said to me, he sent me a text, or he called me and he said, I got to know what you think of this. He goes, and I'm calling you and I'm asking you because I know you're going to tell me the truth. And I did. I said, I don't know if it's the right direction. I'm not sure it's what you should. Look, the guy's made 50 records or whatever. You can make some missteps. You can try some different things. You can get experimental. It's fine. Maybe a segment of fans will like it. Maybe 20 years down the road, it'll be viewed as this underground classic. But at the time, I'm like, I don't know if that's what you should be doing. It doesn't feel right to me. And we had a short discussion about it. Yeah. So there are a lot of artists that appreciate somebody that will actually tell them. I mean, I had a conversation with Lars Ulrich, the Deaf Magnetic. I loved the record, but I hated the production. I thought it sounded like crap, and I said it. And Lars and I when they came around and toured, Lars invited me to the show. We did a TV interview. We talked about it. We debated it, and we're friends to this day. Right. Most people roll with that. Def Leppard, I told them, man, you guys got way too slick and too polished. Would you give me something like High and Dry again? We joke about it. Yeah. So there's people that remember what it is to be fans and can handle it. And there's unfortunately a small percentage that they just can't process any sort of criticism.
And as tight as you are with Sammy Hagar, you put out your top 20 Van Halen songs, and you didn't pander to Sammy. The first 6, 20 to 14, those 6 were Hagar songs, and then I think the top 14 songs were Roth era Van Halen songs. So there's another point.
I gotta keep it real. I mean, I gotta be straight about it. I don't, even if there's issues or I've had issues with people or whatever, that will never cloud or compromise how I feel as a fan about the music. I just don't roll like that. You mentioned Kiss. I mean, Kiss was my gateway band. They were my most famous band. The guy I'm closest with, they were my biggest band, my most personally important band. But the guy I'm closest with and have the most history by far with in that band that I'm still close with to this day is Ace Frehley. I just attended his birthday dinner last week. But I've said this to Ace, and he knows it. Like when they put out the 4 solo records, my favorite of the 4 was Paul's. Most people say Ace. Mine was Paul's. And everyone's like, how could you even say that? Because the guy won't talk to you and he's to you and this and that. I go, because I'm not going to ever change as a fan. Like, that's his prerogative. It's his business. I'm a fan. That's it. So people can't see the good and the bad. Sometimes there's certain people that 99% is great. And then the one thing that you said they don't like wipes away everything and they're gone. And look, that's fine. Nobody owes me anything. I'll always love the music. I keep doing what I'm doing. And I'm confident in knowing that I'm doing what's most important, which is serving my audience and keeping it real for them. And that's what's most important to me.
Eddie Trunk, I've kept you way too long. Thank you, my brother, for chatting. And I really enjoyed this. And I hope our listeners do as well. Appreciate you, man.
I enjoyed it, Jacques. Thank you so much for having me, and best of luck to you. And when I'm in New Orleans next, I hope to look you up and maybe get a hurricane or something.
Absolutely. I'd love that. Love that.
All right,
Thank
man.
you, brother. Okay.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Okay. You too, man.